My name is Howard, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. Rhonda, thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak. It's an honor to be here. I knew I was going to have a good time, but it's been a much better time than I knew I was going to have. Last night I hung out with Hank and some friends that came down from Oregon and that we know up there, and then this morning I hung out with Kenny S. from way the hell over in Bullhead City, and Kenny made the 12-step call on me, so he's very, very important in my life, and always has been. So when I woke up this morning, first thing I knew was that I was going to have a good day, you know, and I felt good about myself and felt good about my life. And then about 8 o'clock, there were 5 or 6 of our friends came up, and we meditated together for a half hour, and it's just, you know, it's just been a terrific day. I feel good, and that's a complete reversal over the way my life was always before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and for quite a while after I came from Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't feel good. No, I just never felt good in and of myself. By myself, I could not feel good. I want to tell you before I get started that some of you know this, you know, that speakers are not authorities in Alcoholics Anonymous. Our primary authority about alcoholism, about our program of recovery, is in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And speakers just share their experience, strength, and hope. And in recognition of that, whenever I'm asked to talk, I make up stuff and say that it's in the big book in order to add credibility to my talk. I make up page numbers. Nobody ever checks. I also look at my watch. Well, it's so dark up here you can't even see, but I'm going to look at my watch anyway. Not that I'm going to see what time it is, but in order to give those of you that are worried about it a sense of optimism that I care what time it is. I don't even see what time it is. I just do it for you. So, in the big book, on page 45, it says lack of power is our dilemma. And I've heard that since I first came to AA, and gradually over time, it meant more and more to me. And I know that all my life, I lacked the power to feel good. I just felt bad. I was born in Alhambra in Los Angeles County, but the first home I can remember was in this little town in Kansas. And I was in grade school, and I saw a movie in the local theater, and back then, some of you guys know this, but back they had a short feature before the main feature at the movie, and the short feature, this particular movie, was a film on training wild elephants in India. And they took the wild baby elephants out, and they started their training by putting a chain around their right front leg and the other end of the chain around a huge tree. And they'd snub that elephant up to the tree, and it would fight the chain and fight the chain and fight the chain until its experience caused it to come to believe, without it knowing that it came to believe that it's futile to pull against the chain, and it stopped pulling against the chain. Then they went ahead with the next phase of the little elephant's training. But in the movie they showed a big elephant harvesting the forest, pushing trees over, hooking up to a tree with a harness and pulling that tree out of the forest. And at the end of the day, in order to hold that big elephant, they put a chain around its right front legs and drove a relatively short stake deep enough in the ground that when they put the chain around the stake, the other end got tight on the big elephant's leg, And because of the limiting belief they had imposed on the elephant when it was a baby, its mind wouldn't let it pull against the chain. And they held the big elephant, not really with the chain and not really with the stake, but they held the big elephant with the belief. And I was in Alcoholics Anonymous less than a year, and I heard Don Gates sharing about how we learn things when we're kids, and we don't know why we learn them. And I remembered the baby elephant thing, and I thought, man, that's right. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous with 950,402, approximately. Baby elephant beliefs just like that. You know? Stuff that had been imposed on me as truth that I had come to believe, and I didn't even know that I believed it. Yet I felt and I behaved like what I believed was the truth. So that when I was a little kid in this Kansas town, now many speakers in I don't make a difference if you're from South Dakota or Las Vegas or Arkansas, many speakers will tell you they were born and raised in the Bible Belt. But because so many people from so many different places say that, nobody knows where the Bible Belt is. And I don't either, but I know it buckles about 45 miles southwest of Wichita, Kansas, right there in that Methodist church. And I learned in there, I came to believe and didn't know I came to believe that God and I were separate. God was an anthropomorphic being, a man, up in a place called heaven, which was kind of a city in the clouds behind the pearly gates with streaks of gold, which was all right for God, but I was here. And I never realized that I believed about the separation, but I know that was part of the deal. And I knew that I didn't behave the way God wanted me to, so God wouldn't reward me. And when I was 4 or 5 years old, I was praying for the first time when I knew who I was praying to and why I was praying and what I was praying for. And what we were praying for it not to rain so that the farmers could harvest their wheat. Wheat harvest started the next day on Monday morning. And it started raining Sunday afternoon. And it hailed, and the wind blew, and it destroyed 80-90% of the Sumner County, Kansas wheat crop. And nobody pointed the finger at me, but I knew whose fault it was. I knew who wasn't doing what you had to do, you know. Now, if you're 4 or 5 years old and you assume the entire responsibility for the Kansas wheat crop, you have an ego problem. And I didn't feel good about destroying the wheat crop. I had not wanted to do that, but I did it, you know. And I didn't feel good about God. And I didn't, you know, I didn't feel good about anything. When I started to school, I never ever felt good about the kind of student I was. I never ever felt good about the kind of son I was. My grandparents were from Germany, and they were from Prussia, Germany. I ain't talking about Bavaria, where they have these happy-go-lucky lifestyle with their beer garden parties. These guys are hard-nosed. And I kid about Grandpa and Grandma. They were married 66 years, and I say that on their 66th wedding anniversary, Grandpa said, "You know, I love Ma so much that last week I almost told her." I just make that up because he never almost told her. Nobody in that family almost told anybody that they loved them. They just didn't do that. And that didn't make me an alcoholic, but the fact is, and Dad used to beat me. I was 3 or 4 years old the first time I really got a beating, and I'll tell you, it puts you in a state of low-grade alert for a long, long time. And I got beaten after that, you know. And beating didn't make me an alcoholic, but I never got where I liked being beaten. There are people who I don't understand, who I don't identify with at all, who get where they like being whipped. I'm not that way. So I felt bad. And when I was 12 years old, I drank enough whiskey so that it did for me what I think it does for nearly every alcoholic. For the first time in my life, I felt good. I felt that sense of ease and comfort that the big book talks about. And I remember thinking, hey, this is what they mean when they say, let's go have a few drinks and get the feeling good. This is what a good feeling is. You know, in the big book on page 569, they describe a spiritual experience. And in their description of a spiritual experience, they talk about a change of consciousness followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Man, that was drinking whiskey. My consciousness changed to one of goodness. And I had a vast change in my feeling and outlook. Things was good and things were all right. You know, a spiritual experience. And I know it was a spiritual experience from that same section of the big book because it says these are frequently accompanied by sudden spectacular upheavals. Well, mine certainly was. So I drank whiskey. I suspect I was an alcoholic to start with, but I drank whiskey all the way through junior high and high school, mostly on Friday nights or Saturday nights, and it was to have fun and be somebody special. And I met my wife, who's when we were in the 7th grade in this little town. 21 kids went through junior high and high school together, and I fell in love with her the first time I met her, and I have loved her ever since, except when I hated her. But mostly I loved her. And we got married when we were 20, and we were married 19 years when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And she needed Al-Anon when we were in the 7th grade. And she never heard of Al-Anon. She never heard of Al-Anon until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and Kenny brought me home when I was brand new to talk to Pat about Al-Anon. And so when she speaks at Al-Anon meetings about my drinking, you would not recognize the same story. Because to me, my drinking started out just for me to feel good, you know, and be somebody special, and it worked, to have fun. And then in 1962, I got a job as an engineer. And there were some things I did really better than the other guy did. I could analyze things. Just had a knack for analyzing things and thinking things through deep. But one of the requirements was to write reports on your analysis, and I couldn't write a report. I didn't, and God, I just freeze up. They talk about writer's block. I didn't know what the hell do they want in the report. What do you put in the report? And besides, I couldn't do it. And one Wednesday night, when the report was due Friday, I took the stuff home to work on at home. I'd never done that before. And I never drank during the week. But this night, I drank about half a pint of whiskey before I sat down to write the report. And all at once, whatever had blocked me from knowing how to write reports, that went away. I had innovative ideas. I had a technical vocabulary that I didn't know I had, that was real, you know. And I wrote this report, and I knew it was a good report. And I took it to work, and a couple days later, my boss called me in and said, "Did you write this report?" This was the guy that had been criticizing my report writing. He said, "Did you write this report?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Howard, I knew you could do it if you just give me the effort." And I remember thinking, effort your ass, I gave you effort. This was whiskey. It was whiskey. But you don't tell them whiskey. I knew not to tell him whiskey because they'll give you a raise for effort and they won't give you anything for whiskey. So I had this secret. It's the whiskey, and that's the way I did stuff that was hard to do, you know, stuff that was difficult for me to do. I just drink whiskey. And before long, I discovered you don't have to wait till Wednesday evening to start this process. You can start it at lunch. And if whiskey causes you trouble, you can switch to martinis at lunch, you know. And I knew martinis, I wasn't going to get drunk on martinis. I didn't like the way they tasted until I had one. And then, of course, you make the discovery you can start at any time of any day. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon someplace. For me, mostly Australia. And but from 1962 to 1970, because I was drinking whiskey, I was promoted from a process analyst to an engineer to a senior engineer, and this is in San Diego at General Dynamics Astronautics, and then I moved to Hughes in Culver City, the Hughes Tool Company Aircraft Division, to kind of a senior engineer's position, and then I was an engineering supervisor. And that's not setting the world on fire, but that's a steady series of promotions. It's progressive. I'm doing good. Doing a lot better, and the only reason I'm doing it is because I'm drinking whiskey. And someplace along the line I discovered to take bennies also, that you're much, much sharper. Pretty soon if all you're doing is drinking whiskey, you get sleepy. Bennies and booze is the perfect combination for me. It helped me in every area of my life except controlling my body functions. Turned out I needed some help there, too. Pat and I used to sleep together. And one night, just one night, I lost control of my body functions. And we got twin beds after that. And we still have twin beds. This was a traumatic experience for her. You know? And I mention that not because I'm proud that that happened, but I'll tell you, up until that happened, I knew that the guys that drank so much that couldn't control their body functions were alcoholic. And the night that happened to me, the next morning, I knew that what had happened was fatigue. I have to work so hard in this jungle of a world in order to make a living that when I finally get to sleep, I'm too tired to wake up. Didn't have anything I didn't know why alcoholics had trouble with their body functions, but that was mine. I always came up with a rationalization. In 1972, my boss, who had been chewing me out about my drinking, called me in and told me I was going to get demoted. He had threatened me, but he called me in and said, you're not going to be on supervision anymore. You've lost credibility with the people that you supervise. I'm going to put you on spatial assignment working for me, and you better get your act together, Howard, because I can't keep you if you don't. And man, I hated to hear that. And I took a 10% cut in pay too, and that I wasn't making enough. And about that time, now Pat had essentially all our married life, whenever things got totally bizarre, she would say, "That's it, I'm leaving." And I never wanted her to leave. Oh, you know, as soon as she said it, I'd say, boy, you better get Clarence Darrow, because I'm going to get the best damn lawyer in the country, and you ain't going to get anything, you know. Or I would say, you can have it all. But the next morning, losing her was never attractive to me. I did not want her to leave me. And her threatening to leave kind of kept me in line as good as anything, as close as I was going to be kept in line. But what happened was this Thursday, I got drunk at lunch, and I didn't come back because my boss had already told me don't come back drunk, so I didn't come back. And then I was drunk Friday, and I didn't come to work, and I, of course, didn't come to work Saturday and Sunday, and on Monday, man, I wasn't going to drink at all. I wasn't going to drink at all, and the next time I remembered I wasn't going to drink at all was when I ordered my second double at the Tattletale. At about 6:30 in the morning, I ordered my second double, and I thought, now, goddamn, you wasn't going to, well, to hell with it. Some people are born to drink, and I'm one of them. And I don't care, you know, and I drank all day. Didn't go to work, didn't even want to go to work. Went home and told Pat, whatever the consequences are, that's it. Some people are born to drink, and I'm one of them. And I might lose everything. If you want to save anything, go have it put in your name. You know, if you want to leave me, I understand, leave me. I may lose my job, but people on Skid Row drink, and I'm born to drink. I'm going to drink. And the next morning when I woke up, that sounded very, very unattractive. Skid Row, losing Pat, man. I thought, I'm going to go into work and try to rescue what I can. And when I got to work that next morning, I hadn't drank at all. My boss was there, and I found out before I talked to him from his secretary that he had to leave the plant Thursday afternoon, and he had just gotten back this morning. And I wasn't in any trouble at all. How could have I blown this so far out of proportion? You know what my next problem was? I had not had a drink yet today. You know, whatever the hell, you know, that was my problem, and I went and solved that problem. And that night when I went home and talked to Pat, I drank about a pint through the day, babied it. And I said, did you go see the lawyer? And she said, yes. And I said, are you going to put stuff in your name? She said, he said we don't have anything. Except the mortgage, and we want to leave that in your name. But she said, you know what else he said? He said, you sound like an alcoholic. He said, you don't want to divorce him. You guys have been together since you was kids. He's an alcoholic. Get him to go to AA. I said, well, Pat, AA is for people whose life is in trouble because of their drinking. Our life isn't in trouble. Now, the day before my life was in the, not today. There ain't no trouble today. But if ever our life gets in trouble, I'll go to AA. After that, I had a doctor diagnose me. After he said, my son took me to the doctor because my right leg wasn't working every time. And I was seeing double all the time. And I hadn't had anything to drink or use for three days. My son took me to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, how much do you drink? And I said, I don't drink at all. I don't. I hadn't drank for 3 days. I don't drink at all. And a little bit, he said, well, if you drank, I'd know what was wrong. I said, that ain't it. Later on, he said, are you sure you don't drink? And I called him all kinds of sons of bitches, and I stormed out of his office, you know. Later on, when I'm making my amends, I go back to apologize, and I told him, I said, you know, I really was drinking a lot then. And he showed me his entry for that visit that day. This man is acutely intoxicated with probable alcoholic neuropathy. And that he stormed out of the office untreated. Well, I wasn't untreated. I knew now that I was going to have to stop drinking. I was going to have to stop taking amphetamines. And in a little bit, my right leg, I was less than a week, my right leg was working and I was seeing good, and my boss gave me a difficult assignment. And I remember thinking, you know, you can't do this work without drinking at all. I'm just going to drink enough to get my heart started, get my brain working, get my stomach settled, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to baby a half a pint through the day. This time it's going to be different. And before I got through that time, it was a hell of a lot different. I had a convulsive seizure that time. That's different. If you've never done that, that's different. And it's more different for your wife, you know. Jesus said a lot different. Now she's like a fawn in a forest fire, you know, and don't know what the hell to do. And I've gotten us hopelessly in debt, and she don't even know that. I'm just really in trouble, and I had an opportunity to sell some equipment that I didn't own. Equipment that I found right before the owner lost it. And I gave it to this guy to fence. And 9 days later, I'm in the tattletale. I'm broke. I paid my tab Friday, and now on Sunday I'm further into the tab than I had been when I paid it off. And I just don't have any money, and there's no place to get any money. And I'm trying to line up some more equipment sales there in the tattletale without this other guy involved. And the next morning when I woke up, you know how we wake up. We just feel like hell when we wake up, not just physically, but everywhere, you know. And then it dawned on me, man, you shouldn't have said anything in the tattletale about stealing equipment. Now they know about selling equipment, because now you, in essence, admitted you're stealing. And then it occurred to me this equipment that I had found wasn't owned by Hughes. It was owned by the federal government and was issued to Hughes to use on a government contract. And I immediately remembered that this process ends up with agents from the Santa Monica office of the FBI coming around looking for the government's property. And I experienced what on page 30 is summarized as a feeling of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I saw that I was a disgrace. I was a disgrace to myself. I wasn't going to be a thief, but I'm a thief. And not only am I a thief, I'm a candidate for a hard time in a federal penitentiary. And even if I could escape that, I cannot escape the disgrace that my family is going to have to live through. Man, I've got to stop drinking until this blows over. And then I remembered Pat and the AA thing. And I had heard of Kenny Sixberry from the Tattletale. Now, he was one of the few alcoholics that drank in the Tattletale. And then it turns out, because nobody in the Tattletale is an alcoholic until they join Alcoholics Anonymous. Then they are the worst alcoholic that ever walked the face of the earth. If we ever get that bad, we're going to, well, he was the resident bad example of alcoholism. And I got his phone number, and I called him about sometime in the morning, and I said, would you take me to an AA meeting? And he said, my home group meets tonight. He said, I'll be glad to take you. Are you drinking now? I said, no, I wasn't. I just finished a half a pint. I fooled him because he said, well, try not to drink anymore. He said, if you're too drunk, you can't help the meeting, and the meeting won't help you. So don't try not to drink anymore, and we'll go to meeting. And And I drank a bunch more, you know, and I took a bunch of bennies. So by 6 o'clock in the evening, I didn't know what the hell I'd called Alcoholics Anonymous for. Things aren't that bad. Kenny got me, and we went to the Culver City Studio Group. I got in the truck. I said, I am not an alcoholic. And he smiled. He still got the best smile in town. He smiled and said, I don't know if you're an alcoholic or not, but we're going to the right place. And I said, well, don't tell anybody that you know that knows me that I'm going to an AA meeting. And he said something to the effect that everybody that knew me knew that my life was screwed up because of my drinking. He said everybody feels that way when they come to AA. And AA wants to do everything they can to keep it from those people that these guys may be thinking about getting their act together. We want them to think that they want to stay screwed up. So we're not going to tell them. I said, I hear you, but don't tell them. And he took me to the studio group where I met the nicest people that I have met. The only people in my life that had ever welcomed me, genuinely welcomed me, and I told each one I wasn't an alcoholic. And each one said, that's all right, you're in the right place. Except a guy named Charlie Pitts. Charlie was a slipper and told me he was a slipper. And he said, I don't think sometimes I'm an alcoholic. And I drink again and I lose everything. But I'm always welcome back in AA. He said, you know, you don't have to think you're an alcoholic. You don't have to say you're an alcoholic. You don't even have to be an alcoholic to be a member of the Culver City Studio Group. The only requirement for membership here is a desire to stop drinking. And if you're drinking and you have a desire to stop drinking and you think you'd like to be a member, you're a member. That's all the voting there is. That's all the nominations. Nobody needs to second it. You're in. And whether you're here or not, your place will always be here. And then he said, nobody could take your place in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Nobody can take the newcomer's place. Jesus, that was a terrific thing to say. And they started a meeting. Kenny was the leader that night. I don't even know if he remembers that, but somebody read chapter 5. One of the things I didn't mention before was, in terms of the stuff that I came to believe, when I was growing up, without knowing it, I came to believe that it's important that I'm right. And as that progressed, it became important that you know I'm right. And a lot of times that you know you're wrong. And that's the way I came to AA. In terrible trouble and knowing it all. And the first time I heard chapter 5, I was sitting there and they said, remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. I said to myself, cunning is not an attribute that you can assign to an inanimate substance such as alcohol. Cunning requires intellect. Alcohol has no intellect. They've got that wrong. 2 lines later, but there is one who has all power, that one is God, may you find him now. I had heard when I was a baby elephant that in AA they don't even say God. They say higher power. They just said God. Man, I must be in the wrong branch, you know. Then I thought, but they said God has all power, but before that they said alcohol is powerful. Well, if alcohol has power, God does not have all power. He just has all power except what alcohol has. And if now when I'm thinking that way, I'm missing stuff. That if I was listening to what they're saying, could have helped me. But I'm, So what we had is somebody hopeless and somebody helpless who didn't know they were hopeless and helpless. Who in retrospect, Kenny and I were talking on the way over to the room here, there's been people all my life try to help me. Good people. My wife tried to help me. Her folks tried to. Her dad was the greatest guy in the world to help people. And ministers, school teachers, the superintendent of schools, everybody saw something in me and they wanted to help me. But before they could help me, They had to tell me what was wrong with me. And that just pissed me off. And maybe I wasn't in a position to act like it. I may not have been able to get mad at them. But by God, I was. And I just shut down. I don't care what they said. I couldn't hear it. And I didn't want to be that way. I hadn't planned to be that way. But that's the way I was when I came here. You couldn't help me. I was helpless and I was hopeless. The only thing that could help me was drinking whiskey and taking bennies. And I came here, and from the very first, nobody has ever told me what's wrong with me. You have endlessly told me what's wrong with you. You have told me what you used to be like, what happened, and what your life is like now. And I can hear that. And you described your alcoholism as an obsession of the mind that somehow, some way, this time it's going to be different. Chuck Innes talked about leaving MGM at the end of the day, going to the backstage bar to have 2 drinks, 3 at the most. Next thing you know, it's last call to alcohol. He don't want to leave because he's insulted somebody that's waiting outside, going to kick hell out of him, Man, I identify with this, And then the next day after work, what does he do? He says, I go by the backstage bar to have 2 drinks, 3 at the most. I am obsessed with that. That is my mental obsession that somehow, some way, this time, I'm just going to drink 2, 3 at the most. It's impossible for me to not believe that. Unaided, because I have a mental obsession that that is true. I identify with that. But then they let me off the hook by talking about the phenomenon of craving. I had never had a phenomenon of craving. And what they were talking about was after a couple of drinks, this guy, in my mind's eye, turns into Ray Milland in The Lost Weekend. He'll kill for a drink. I never, never happened to me. At the break, I told Kenny, I said, I never craved a drink. And he said, you mean if you had a double shot early morning in the Tattletale, you wouldn't crave another drink? I'd say no. I'd want one. He said there's a class of alcoholic, and he said there's a lot of this. They had just read from the doctor's opinion the different classes of alcoholics at this home group meeting. They'd read that. And he said, there's a lot of different classes, and our big book doesn't cover all the classes. And he said there's a class, a lot of them here, who are of the type that when they start to drink, they keep slugging them down so fast that the craving doesn't have an opportunity to set in. That was my class. The studio group back then, it was a beginner's meeting, and what they had done, it became clear to me later on that what they had done, these old-timers had read the chapter Working with Others. And what they did was discuss the thing. They asked, is anybody here in their first or second meeting? And when somebody's hand went up, it didn't make any difference what the planned subject was going to be. If you had a newcomer, the topic was the stuff in the big book that it says you talk to the newcomer about the first and the second time you meet them. And the second half of the meeting was the part about God. And I wasn't an atheist, but and I had been one time, and then I read a little article by Dr. Einstein, who declared himself to be a deeply religious man in his own way. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be an atheist either. I'm going to, and what I did was just make up stuff and say that's what Dr. Einstein believes too. And but my God didn't change things. My God had no anthropomorphic characteristics by this time. God doesn't have ears. God doesn't change things in order to accommodate people in their troubles. And I explained that to Kenny. I said I'm an alcoholic, but that your program won't work for me because I'm not an atheist. But my God doesn't change things in order to accommodate people in the problem. My God doesn't answer prayers And Kenny said, "That's terrific, Howard. You're going to be able to help me with God. But can you not drink?" I said, "Yes, I can not drink." He said, "Don't take bennies either." Hell, I hadn't even told him I took bennies. I don't know, unless he noticed I said the same things over and over again really fast. What Kenny told me, by the way, I know not too long after this that Kenny did a fourth step. But that night, Kenny said, because one of the things I wasn't going to do after the meeting, I said, "I'm an alcoholic, but this won't work for me, and I'm not going to do any of that step stuff, particularly that writing stuff." And I was thinking about this hard time in the federal penitentiary, and I sure as hell wasn't writing that down. In fact, I wasn't ever telling anybody about that. I was going to let that blow over. And Kenny said, "I shouldn't tell you this, but next month I'm going to have 8 years of sobriety. And I really have a good life. And I have a good," he said, "I drive down the street sometimes and I just feel so good. And I'm so grateful to God because He's bringing goodness in my life." And he said, "What I shouldn't tell you, and I don't want you to do it the way I do it, but I'm going to be sober 8 years and I've never done a written inventory yet. So don't worry about the written inventory." He said, the way it's worked for me, I come to meetings and I listen. And if somebody describes a solution to a problem that doesn't fit me, I try to respect their course of action, and I respect their sobriety. I know that somebody is being helped by this, but I'm going to leave it. But he said, I listen, and time and time and time and time again, people share solutions. People share solutions to that, so I'll know what time it is. And I'm hard hearing, and I can hear the rooster crow. So time and time again, I hear people describe solutions to problems that I don't even know I have until I hear their solutions. And I think, hey, if I would do that in that circumstance in my life would be better. And he said, I do that. And my life is better. And I have a great life. So don't drink, and let's go to meetings. And let's listen. I got drunk one more time. In retrospect, I needed to get drunk because I sure as hell, absolutely at the deepest level, in my innermost self, saw I was an alcoholic. I couldn't get sober for a week, and I came back, and Kenny took me to meetings. And I never had laughed. I had never laughed before. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I heard Flo D talk. Flo said her love affair with alcohol was like the love affair a tomcat has with a female skunk. And I never got all I wanted, I just got all I could stand. I'm identifying with that. She hurt herself, couldn't sleep at night, got shingles. 3 o'clock in the morning, she got mad at God, and she shook her fist in God's face and said, "Why me?" She said, a booming voice came to my ear and said, "Because, Flo, there's something about you that pisses me off." Now, I knew she hadn't heard that. But I loved that. And that helped me. That helped me with God. You got to be sick for that to help you. But I was sick. And I heard a guy named Ski from San Diego say he was 36 years and learning that all the people that he hated didn't feel it. I don't know why I hadn't known that. That's such an obvious thing to know, but I didn't know it. I thought they had it coming and I was giving it to them. And I was the one that wasn't sleeping nights. And the next meeting I went to, they said, anybody have a problem they want to discuss? And twice in my AA life, I've held up my hand And this time I said, how do you not hate people? And there were 20 people in the room. I got 20 answers, and one of them was the gal named Patty Hicks, who had 2 weeks on me. Now you'll hear how old-timers tell you to sit down and shut up and listen. I've never had an old-timer tell me that. But Patty Hicks used to tell me that 3 or 4 times a week. With her rotten 2 weeks. But Patty said, I just heard that you can't be hateful and grateful at the same time. And if you're sober alcoholic, there's a basis for gratitude. And if you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a basis for, but you have to work for it. You have to work to feel the gratitude. I remember her saying that. And I was telling people, I don't pray. God don't change things. I told Frank Giroux that a lot of times. But some guy said, and I don't remember who said this, but some guy said, I didn't pray either, but I learned to meditate. And I said, well, how do you meditate? And he said, well, Bill describes that in chapter 11 of the 12 and 12. And so I read that. Hey, that's prayer. I ain't going to pray. That's just prayer. That's a St. Francis of Assisi prayer. I'm not going to do it. But, you know, he talks in there about positive imagining, and he talks in there about kind of visualizing goodness. And what happened to me was in times of crisis at work, when I would get up in the morning, I started looking at my life during the first several months of 1972. When all the character and quality of every circumstance and event in my life was disintegrating, was plummeting, was crumbling, and there was nothing in my life to stop it. There was no bottom. There was no bottom. It was going, and there was nothing to stop it. And I would bring that into my consciousness as truth. And then I would look at what the last 3 weeks of my life has been like. Kenny tracked down that equipment that I'd stolen and sold, called me and helped Pat and I go get the equipment and take it back to the company that I stole it from. And I told my boss that I'd stolen it. He said, don't say you stole it. I said, but Tom, I thought, he said, just shut up and go home. It was quitting time. He said, just go home. And I went home. And the next morning when I come back in, he called me in the office. He said, you know that equipment you said that you stole, you were talking about? He said, it's in the calibration lab and it's in perfect working order. And I may not know where it's been, but I know it wasn't stolen because I have it. And our company procedures require me to fire anybody that steals from us, and it don't provide for bringing it back. So just keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything to anybody. And I haven't. Except the next day. I woke up, and the first thing that came to my mind was that I was free of this. I had told Kenny it didn't bother me. It don't bother me that I stole it. I just don't want to get caught. That would just, I don't want to get caught. And he's talking about taking it back, for Christ's sake. That's insane. But I did that, and the next morning, the weight of the world is off my shoulders, and I don't even know the weight of the world is on my shoulders until the next morning. And I had a good feeling, and I hadn't drank, and I hadn't used, and I felt good. And it's very clear good feeling because I wasn't drunk. And the good feeling may not have lasted 15 minutes or 15 seconds, but how long it lasted, it embedded itself in my memory as truth in such a way that when I got up in the morning, I could look at what my life was like before I came to AA, and I could look at what my life's now. I'm not a candidate for a hard time. My children are not a candidate for disgrace. I feel like hell about, I feel like crap about my life a lot of the time. And I go home from work, and Pat and I fight like scalded rattlesnakes. But I show up in an AA meeting, and you guys put me back together. I hear Norm Alpy. Norm Alpy and I were both born in the San Gabriel Valley. Norm drank just to get a little buzzy, danced with the dollies, I think, hey, I'm a lot like this guy. Then he said he spent Easter week on Balboa Island, went to the Rendezvous Ballroom and danced with music as Stan Kenton. And in 1952, I had spent Easter week, probably 15 years after Norm was there, but Count Basie was the orchestra. It was a big deal for me. I'd never, and I thought, man, I'm just like old Norm, and Norm is going with this red-headed girl, running with old Red, and I thought, God, he and I are a lot alike. And then he said he became the vice president and general manager of the Midnight Auto Supply in the San Gabriel Valley. He said, I became a car thief. And I thought, well, I'm not a car thief, but I'm just like Norm, Then he comes to AA. And he said, I was a taker. I'm not a giver by nature. I'm a taker. I'm a taker of things and a user of people. I'm a loser because I'm a taker. Now, when he said that, I said to myself, without words, I just knew, I'm just like Norm. I'm a taker. I'm a loser because I'm a taker. I'm a taker of things and a user of people. I'm a loser. That was important for me to see about me. And Norm didn't say it about me. He said it about himself, and I saw it about me. And now he's on the sunny side of the street. His life is good. He has friends, He's going to go home, and his redhead wife's going to be glad to see him. He's going to take his daughter down to I have a daughter. He's going to take his daughter down to the department store and buy her some high-heeled shoes and a prom dress so she can go to high school prom. Someday he's going to buy her a wedding dress and walk her down the aisle so she can marry some jackass. And I leave that meeting knowing more about myself and my alcoholism and the things that I have to watch out for, and at the same time have a sense of optimism and enthusiasm. And Pat and I didn't ever fight after I got home from an AA meeting. I don't know if ever, but generally she'd come home from Al-Anon and I'd come home from AA, and it'd be a better day. And I'd get up the next day and I'd have another rotten damn day at work. Come home and fight with Pat, go back to a meeting, get put back together. Things were working all right, and I was kind of doing the steps. You remember the first, I don't know what Kenny remembers, but the first week he took me to a meeting and I got a hold of the Members' Eye View of Alcoholics Anonymous, which Steve, who gave a terrific talk last night, mentioned. Alan McGinnis wrote that thing, and Alan talks about working the steps in cafeteria style. And the first week I went, I knew what that meant, and I went over to ask Kenny, what does that mean? And he explained that, you can skip some. He said, that's what he's talking about, cafeteria style. Well, that's the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it cafeteria style. I was pushing the lawnmower one Saturday morning and hit a tree root, and I walked into the handle, and it hit my chest, right there where that bone is. Man, that hurt. There was a nut sticking out on that, a bolt, and that just like getting hit in the chest with a ball-peen hammer, God, it just was excruciatingly painful, and I was immediately totally enraged at my wife, who wasn't even there. I see people, some people shake their head, those are Al-Anons. They don't understand that, but the alcoholics get it, I immediately says, God damn her, and God damn AA too. AA don't work. I'm not going to that meeting and shake hands and grin like a baboon and say, isn't this wonderful? It's not wonderful, and I'm not going. I had said that a lot of times, but I always went. And that night I went to the Malibu meeting, and was warmly welcomed there by Jack Daly, who was a big thrill that I knew Jack, and he always treated me anyway, very special. And Don Gates was the speaker that night, and he said in his talk, if you're new in AA and you're not working the steps, AA will stop being fun. And you'll decide you're not going to go to meetings anymore. You're not going to drink, but you're not going to go to meetings. He said you don't go to the meetings for a while, then you'll decide to go to the bar and have a drink. And if you do that and the bartender says, what's the matter? I thought you was going to AA. Don't AA work? He said, if you're not working the steps, be honest with him and tell him you don't know if AA works or not because you weren't trying. Man, that was the truth, Nothing in my head popped off about that. My head was always popping off, always popping off. But didn't pop off about that. I knew it was the truth. On the way home from the meeting, I made a decision. I came to believe that I cannot believe this won't work. I cannot let myself think this won't work until I've given it a try. I made a decision to do a fourth step. Kenny, about this time, had moved to Simi Valley, and I hooked up with a guy named George Cooper who helped me through the fourth step. And then he heard my fifth step, and the sixth and seventh. And the fact is, when I was about half, man, I said that seven-step prayer. I said the seven-step prayer, and I said it kind of thoughtfully, and nothing happened. But what, much to my surprise, was after I was about halfway through the ninth step, I started reacting different than I had ever reacted before in times of crisis. I'll tell you a crisis. I was sitting behind a couple of guys at a red light, and the light turned green, and they just sat there. All my life, I had known, because I had this baby elephant belief, we get to go when the light's green. And then I knew he's got 2 milliseconds to move before I'm hollering, "That's as green as that light's going to get. What the hell are you waiting on? Give him the horn." This morning, the light turned green, and what occurred to me was, what possible difference does it make what color the light is, how you're going to feel? What relationship is there? And then I started having a good feeling. It's called patience. Never had it before. I started having a good feeling, goosebumps coming up my legs. And the guy saw that the light had changed, and he turned to go up the street, and he turned to wave an apology to me, and I gave him the high sign, and I had goosebumps on the back of my hand, just I have them now. And I was high all week long. Swear to God, I was above it. It would have been a tough week. There was a lot of stuff at work going on that was tough. And I just saw, these problems, but these problems can't touch me. I was invulnerable to them. I just saw they can't hurt me. By the end of the week, that had eroded away, and I lost it. But it embedded itself in my mind as truth, something that really happened to me. I came home one night, and Pat had been to Al-Anon, and Pat's Al-Anon sponsor, I didn't know that at the time, but her sponsor said, "Howard's doing good in AA. Talk to him about this problem, and I think you'll get a good response." Well, she said, "Are you going to a meeting tonight?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, the kids and I want you to stay sober." And I think, she's speaking for the kids. This is a prepared talk. Now I'm in alert, And she said, you don't help us around the house as much as you did when you was in the tattletale. And we need you to help. And I said, "What the hell are you talking about?" And I listed a couple things I'd done around the house. I presented them as if I'd done them recently. I presented them as if these are just samples from a hell of a long list of stuff I could tell you. And she dropped her prepared speech in favor of tearing my heart out with just. And my response was one of calmness. And my head said to me, "You're right, Howard. I feel terrible because I'm not helping her around the house. I know I've got to do better." And she brings it up to me, and instead of me talking to her about it, I invalidated her problem, and I invalidated her, and now she's mad, and I knew I had done it. I think that's called understanding. And that had never happened to me before. But that was one of the things I was really praying for in the 7-step prayer. And I didn't realize that I was going to have to do the 9th step for the 7th step to get a foothold. But I said, "We'll talk about it later. I'm going to the meeting." And I went to the meeting and came back, and she had gone to Al-Anon, and she's happy. And my experience is hope reigns supreme in the heart of an Al-Anon. If you just give them a little hope, God, she was happy. It had worked. I had acknowledged the problem, you know. And it's been a long time, and you know, last week or not very long ago, she said, you know, you're really a good person, but you still don't do enough around the house. Which is the truth. You know, but we're going to have to, I don't know. But we have a good life. When I was 10 years sober, Pat was with me. She and I had committed to staying together. You know, that was a big thing for me. That was a big thing for me. She wasn't going to leave. No matter what, she wasn't going to leave. Now, we said no matter what, but if I get drunk again, she's out of there. I know that. But that's not even an option, so we don't have to, we dismiss that as an option, and we dismiss leaving as an option. So I've got her in my life, that's a great sense of security for me. And I get promoted to my career goal. My career goal, I got that position. We had a savings account. We had a retirement fund. The debts are paid, you know. We bought a house in the early 60s in Culver City, and it's appreciating faster than we even know. And in August, I had my 10th year birthday cake. And before August was over, I got a work assignment that was a consequence of the new position. And it was dreadful. I just dreaded having to do this. And I thought, anyway, I was meditating. I started meditating every day in October of 1974 for 30 minutes a day, and I haven't missed a day since. So the meditation became an important part for me to get my act together in the morning. And I could get my act together, but when I first woke up, it was dreadful. Now, after you're 10 years sober, you think, for Christ's sake, that something's got to be a lot better than this, you know. And one morning I said to myself, why can't you just, at the end of the meditation, why can't I just turn this over and leave it over? And what I had, if I was talking to a non-AA group, I'd say was a fantasy. But for you guys, I'll say, I had a vision of a frozen lake. And I knew that the ice was frozen solid. The lake was frozen solid. And my life was just walking across the lake. But I also knew if I wasn't convinced that the ice was thick enough to hold me, I would dread every step of the way. And I knew that I had not convinced myself that the ice in my life is thick enough. I have to come to believe. And I went back and started, and I found a lot of stuff in the big book that I was discrediting because I already knew it all. I was 10 years sober before I found out that I already knew it all. On page 48 and 49, it talks the prosaic steel girders are made up of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speeds. My mind says electrons don't whirl around each other at incredible speeds. They whirl around the nucleus. He has that wrong. Then everything else on that page was wrong. You know? And I didn't know I was doing that. But when I discovered I was doing that, I can tell you this, there's a lot worse ways you can describe electrons than the way Bill described them. Perfectly all right with me if they whirl around each other. Because in the next paragraph I found that the perfectly logical conclusion is that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful, guiding, creative intelligence. The second step says, I come to believe that. I don't come to have faith that that's true. I don't come to have hope that that's true. I come to believe that that's true. That it's ice all the way down. It's solid as a rock. I need to be convinced of that. Convinced is the word he uses after the ABCs. Being convinced, we are at step 3. A belief is an emotional conviction that something is true. And I've spent a lot of my AA life since then strengthening that conviction. And the stronger the conviction is, the better my life is getting. When I first came to AA, I would hear you guys say, if you want what we have, and man, I wanted what you had. I wanted what you had. But after I was sober for a number of years, I'd hear, if you want what we have, and I thought, I have what you guys have. But I want more than that. I want what my boss has. In the face of adversity, he never panics. This guy is fearless. That's what I want. I want to be fearless in the face of adversity. My boss retired in August of 1987, and I got promoted to his job, a job better than my career goal. And I loved that job. And one day after I had that job, after another crisis, where we had congressional investigations, we had the big deal, my boss called me and said, Howard, I just wanted to tell you that I picked the right guy for the job. Because through all these my job partly was to give them factual information to answer questions with about this particular problem. He said, we've had the right information for every question. He said, I've got the right guy for the job. And I thought, man, that's great. And I got home, and on my way home, I thought, hey, you have what your boss had. And then I thought, oh, no, you don't. He was a lot better manager than you. And he was a lot better person, a people person, and he's a better engineer. Which was true. But then my other voice said, yes, but he takes it for granted, and you take it for grace. And I knew that was true. All the goodness in my life comes from God's grace in my life. I know that, and that's the greatest source of strength and the greatest source of gratitude I could have. And I got all of that from you guys, And it started with Kenny Sixberry over there, who, of course, I'm grateful for God for Kenny Sixberry. And all the rest of you guys that have added so much as the time goes on. Reading the book on meditation, it says, wherever you find God, that's the right way. If you think God out and know intellectually that God is there and you're convinced, that's right for you. Or if you just feel that God is there and you're convinced, that's right for you. But remember, wherever you see God pass, mark that spot and go sit in that window again. The minute I read it, I knew. Program of Alcoholics Anonymous is my window. This is where I came to see God pass. And I'm very, very grateful to all of you for the program and for the opportunity to share with you today. I love you. Thank you. Thank you.